Hey, what's going on, guys? Rhino here, and in my last video, a hate mail video, I was talking about, this creationist who posted a really dumb comment on one of my videos. I was responding to it, and I left out a pretty big part of sort of the argument against creationism. And basically, after I made the video, typically what I do is I make the video and I put it in my editing system and I make edits to it and then I render it. And while it renders, I just browse around on YouTube. I watch some videos. And I came upon this guy named Secular Talk. I believe his name's Kyle. And I'd never seen any videos from him before, at least none where he talked. I think I saw some videos where he posted like other people's clips or something. I'm not sure. It sounded familiar, but I'd never actually seen him talk before. And he was actually talking about a couple different topics. Well, mainly because he watched this video where someone responded to someone else, and or a Christian, not a creationist, but a Christian responded to someone else, an atheist, and he was Kyle was responding to the Christian, pointing out the flaws in his arguments. And it wasn't like a debate, really. It was more just pointing out the fallacies and improbabilities and incorrect statements that were displayed. And he made a really good point, something that I didn't talk about with the creationist in my last video. And that's these creationists demand observable evidence for evolution and the Big Bang, stating that we can't know that the Earth is 4 billion years old or whatever, without actually having someone seeing it that old, that we can't use true dating methods to know, and that we haven't seen true evolution, even though we have seen evolution. We've observed it, but saying that we haven't observed evolution, therefore there's no way we can prove it. But then they go along to assert that creationism is the right thing, that we have to follow the Bible word for word, and that's what we should teach in our schools, teach as fact. And then that's so obviously what's true. When they're making one huge mistake, there's no observable evidence for God. I mean, I know there are tons of people who make arguments like, oh, well, just look around you, all these amazing things, like the beauty of it all is proof that God exists. That's not proof. That's not observable proof. I don't look at my cell phone and say, oh, that's proof God exists, because I know someone made this. I know this was manufactured in a factory somewhere. I don't know where. It's a Samsung, so just look up where they manufacture their galaxies. But then I go outside, and I live in Oregon, and Oregon is known for having very beautiful scenery, especially with trees, like a lot of trees. And I don't look at a tree and state, wow, that's pretty, God must have made that, because we know where that tree came from. We know how it grew there. We know how the whole process came to be. But it's not proof to say that. And actually, in fact, one sec. I'm gonna pull a typical Christian, well, actually typical creationist move here. It's not proof to look at nature and be like, oh, well, it's so beautiful, God made it, because there's a book that explains it, the God delusion. And for anyone who is a Christian or a creationist or an atheist especially, I highly suggest getting this book, The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, as basically it's not necessarily one of those books that you read cover to cover, because it has a whole index where it talks about the different arguments that people make for different religions. It talks about specific things about religion, and it has just a lot of things to cover. And it does talk about the whole argument when people say, oh well, like what we see around us is so beautiful that obviously a God had to create it. And it debunks what they say. So that's not observable evidence for what you state. So you're so hypocritical in your argument, stating that, okay, well, it has to be observable, but we just accept the Bible even though it's not. There's no observable evidence for it, and there never has been. In fact, the Bible is a hell of a lot less accurate than what we've observed through science. What we know to be true, what we know to be historic, what we know to be evident. It's a good way to put it. And then also when people say, okay, well, especially when creationists say, well, the Big Bang is improbable because we don't know what came before it. Something had to come before it. And then they make this argument, oh, well, God is eternal. No. In order for us to have a creator, that creator has to be more complex than us, and that has to have a creator himself. It doesn't make sense that God just was there. Otherwise, you can make the same argument about the Big Bang, about the universe just being there. But creationists refuse to accept it, but they are perfectly fine accepting, hey, God, he's always been there. Just always been there. He's eternal. Which, if you think about it from a logistical point of view, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for a thing to just always have been there. There has to be a start. There has to be something that was there beforehand. It just doesn't make sense that it's illogical for there to just have been a God. Just he was there at all times. And so it's just annoying how creationists are so bold in their statements that, okay, well, obviously the Bible is true, and therefore we need creationism being taught in the schools, even though creationism has no true observable evidence, which goes against everything we state is wrong about evolution and the Big Bang Theory. We still need this to be taught in schools. In fact, when I was watching the Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate, which I've watched 2 times now, all the way through, I could not help myself from getting pissed at Ken Ham for what he was stating. I mean, he was outwardly stating that we need to take evolution, a scientific fact, out of schools because it's indoctrinating children so that they don't know the truth about the Bible, which has no evidence whatsoever for a God, that has no evidence whatsoever for a theory about creation, which has no evidence whatsoever. That's what pisses me off. Now, I know there is no crowd behind this, I guess, is the best way to put it. There is no super big following. I know I think it's stated that like 40% of Americans believe in believe in Genesis word for word, and therefore would be relative creationists. But it's not a big enough thing where I'm worried about the schools adopting creationism as the truth to teach. I'm not worried about that, luckily, because there are smart enough people out there. There are enough intelligently competent people to understand that creationism is not what needs to be taught. It's okay. I mean, I agree with Bill Nye in the I think it's the Big Think video that he made, where he talks about it's okay for you to believe that. Just don't teach your kids that bullshit. Let them think for themselves. Expose them to all different types of things, and don't just tell them, oh, well, this is true, 100%. You can't question it. Even though the evidence is all against it, there's no evidence for it. Just don't question it. You can't indoctrinate people. Don't indoctrinate your kids like that. It's wrong. It's morally wrong, and no children should have to be taught that and be raised like that. You can stay in your own little world that, as Bill Nye states it, that's inconsistent with what we see around us, what we study, what we test, and what we have proven around us. You can stay in that little world if you want, but don't hold your kids back and keep them in that tiny little world. So they're indoctrinated and are raised in this really confusing and really bullshit worldview where a God created us all, and without question it has to be the God from the Bible, even though the Bible has been proven to be wrong about many things. It makes no sense. Creationists are crazy. It's just unquestionable. I mean, I watched like I said, the whole Bill Nye Ken Ham debate twice, all the way through. The first time I just watched it for entertainment. The second time I watched it to study Ken Ham's arguments. And the stuff he was making just absolutely made no sense. But I don't want to get into a video where I'm reviewing Ken Ham's arguments. I just wanted to bring that up because Ken Ham is supposed to be a respected creationist. And if he is the level of standard of the respected creationist, then there is no respect deserved for the creationist point of view. I mean, I know I'm supposed to respect everyone as a human being, and I try to, but it's just a little hard when people are this blinded by faith, by a book that was written by men thousands of years ago. Well, that's about it for the video, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure to comment, rate, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about those crazy-ass creationists. And also, be sure to have a nice day.